Welcome to the Backseat Leadership Podcast, a leadership conversation for those not in the driver's seat of their organizations. You can learn by visiting www.backseatleader.com. And now, here are the hosts of the Backseat Leadership Podcast, Geoff and Brad Merchant.
You're listening to the Backseat Leadership Podcast.
This is it.
I'm your host, Brad Merchant, here with my co-host.
I was Brad. Honestly, here's what happened. You said host and co-host, and I was like, well, which one's better?
No, you were watching a new episode of WandaVision.
Dude, seriously? Yeah, we need to talk about that sometime.
How pathetic.
We should do an entire episode on WandaVision.
No, I actually watched the first two episodes. Thought it was lame. Never watched it again.
Dude, then you've missed it. You do. Goodness. Listen, friends. Listen. This is. Y'all need to comment. Y'all need to post. You need to send at Brad Merchant hate mail because he gave up. He gave up
for good reason
on WandaVision.
It's just like when you give up when you try a cookie and you think it's gonna be awesome and you take a bite and you're like, hey, this is really lame, and you stop eating it because why waste the calorie space?
Yeah, but
that's what I do with WandaVision. Why waste my time?
But Brad,
no, Geoff,
Brad,
I'm the host here. You're the co-host.
Brad,
so, ladies and gentlemen, we are here today
disappointed
to talk about something that really could be descriptive of WandaVision, and that is failure.
Oh,
failure.
Brad.
And so, great segue. So, Geoff.
Brad.
Wow, failure.
Brad.
We can relate with that,
Can we just pause for one more second and talk about how you should have watched the rest of the episodes?
We're moving on, Geoff.
We should stop. We should seriously.
I am inevitable.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Seriously.
Here we go.
Yikes.
Geoff, have you ever failed?
I have failed more times than most people should.
We've already failed this morning. We had some technical difficulties when we're recording this podcast on a Friday morning right now. However,
it's because it's colder.
We're live today. We're live right now.
It's colder than the frozen tundra of Alaska right now.
We've never been, but we could have.
True. We should take a trip there sometime.
No, thank you.
Okay,
Geoff.
We took a trip to a great place in Oxford, England, and that was fun.
We did. We went to Oxford. That was cool.
Great.
Okay, Geoff. So we're talking about
Brad,
failure
you're all
today,
about business
and,
today, and I love it.
am. Stop throwing me off.
Okay, I won't.
Failure, Geoff.
Yeah.
Failure, which might categorize the first part of this podcast, but we're gonna rebound.
Yeah.
So Geoff, talk to me a little bit today about failure. Tell our audience what we're going to be talking about today specifically, and what you want to guide us into.
Well, failure is a thing that I think most leaders just try to avoid with everything in them. Whether you're a type 3 on the Enneagram, as Brad likes to refute that he is not, although he is.
No, I do not refute that, but we have a friend who refutes that.
That's true. He definitely does. And so, like, I think it's a thing that we all simply try to avoid. And the fact of the matter is that if we spend our time avoiding failure, we will miss opportunities to succeed. If we spend our time avoiding failure, we will miss opportunities to succeed. And here's why this is so important. Brad, if you are not attempting something as a leader that is going to put you in a position where you could potentially fail, you will not find those opportunities, or you will not find those golden nuggets, those things that you didn't know you were going to discover, that you ended up discovering because you put yourself out there and you pushed yourself just a little bit further to the point where failure was potentially on the horizon.
Yeah, that's right. Geoff, I think one of the reasons which you'll surely get into this, that we try to avoid failure is because failure brings about a lot of shame, doesn't it? And
sure.
And much like we allow, in fact, I remember a really incredible Tim Keller quote. He said in a sermon, he said, for many of us, the problem is that we let success go to our head and failure go to our heart.
That's good.
What does he get at? He means that failure, we begin to identify with it. It's not something that's happened to us. It's actually something we are.
Sure.
And I think that's why we try to avoid risk, like you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And we never do anything challenging, because if we do something challenging, guess what, Geoff? There is a chance. There's a chance, sometimes a high probability, that failure could happen.
Yeah.
And we avoid it. And as a result, as you've just clearly stated, success is it's far, far, far away from us.
Sure.
Now, talk a little bit about, Geoff, a little bit more about how backseat leaders today cannot live in that, to me, always drifting towards energy force of avoiding failure. but how instead we can lean the other way and say, hey, we're going to take risk. We're not going to allow failure to define us. What can we do? What can we do?
Well, the first thing I think you have to recognize is that failure is a requisite for success. You talk about, I always use this example of when President Kennedy stood in front of the joint session of Congress and said, we're going to go to the moon by the end of this decade, right? And in the process of, we did. We got there. We went to the moon, put a man on the moon, put men on the moon, and in the process, in the intermediate time, failed all the time. Like seriously, like you look at the space program and the things that they accomplished and the things that they did not accomplish, and the list is just as long on both sides.
Yep.
And so the reality is that we have to. That's an example of how one of the things that we need to do is to embrace the reality that failure is requisite for success.
That's right.
You don't recognize that you've been successful until you've failed.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't even know that success is what success is until you've failed, because you recognize that is better than what we have in front of us.
Yeah.
Thomas Edison would use the quote, he's never failed. He's just found success thousands of times or something like that. He's found what wasn't successful thousands of times. The idea is that the more times that we spend, the more opportunities we go, putting ourselves in a position to potentially fail, we will find opportunities for more success. Failure is requisite for success, and we have to embrace that reality.
To your point, Geoff, I think this maybe is a good segue. Failure is not a cul-de-sac.
Right.
It's not took a wrong turn, now I'm stuck here. Instead, failure can actually be a part of a redemptive story that each of us are writing. Talk a little bit about that for the Backseat Leader.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of the thing that most backseat leaders, okay, so there's a few kinds of backseat leaders, right, Brad? I mean, there's some folks who have been backseat leaders for years and years and years, and they probably are going, we're not listening to your podcast because we could write the book, right? Whatever it is. So we don't need to worry about them. But then we've also got some folks who are younger, who are starting out. They want to be front seat leaders, but right now they're backseat leaders because they're new to the organization, they're new to the industry, whatever it may be. And then there's some folks who are just, they're just gaining some experience in doing these type of things. In every situation, failure is a part of the process if we don't make it a destination. And I think, you talk about it, it doesn't have to be a cul-de-sac, but we make it that way. We make it that way when we don't see the outlet roads. We don't see the opportunities to build a road somewhere else. We make it a destination for us, and it's really all in our psyche. You look at what tenacious and people who persevere through things, they recognize that they are going to make mistakes. They recognize that there are going to be some things they're going to fail at, but they don't allow those things to be the block that stops them from moving forward.
It's true.
And so, whether it's fear of your boss saying something, whether it's fear of people thinking, oh, well, he's not quite what he thinks he is, or she could be so much better. Like those thoughts are things that we take on ourselves, and really we stop ourselves from moving forward based on these few things that maybe are part of the process, but they don't have to be a destination, but we make them that way when we do that.
Yeah, that's right. Geoff, I remember this quote that's gone around. I think it was attributed to Francis Chan. It was attributed to D.L. Moody before him, and who knows who it was attributed to before D.L. Moody. But
probably some dead Puritan.
Yeah, it was probably me. And it goes something like this. I'm not afraid of failure, but I am afraid of succeeding at things that don't matter. And what are they getting at? I think what they're getting at is, Geoff, we know this. Things that matter always come with a risk. Always come with a risk. They are never easy. Listen, if doing things that matter were easy, everybody would be doing them, but they're not. And there's a reason. There is a risk that if I try to do this thing that is just loaded and spilling over with significance, there's a chance I could fail. Yeah. And if I fail, I'll be seen as a failure, a total screw up, and nobody wants to be seen that way. And therefore, in our insecurity, we become allergic to risk. Yeah. And I think what you're getting at today, Geoff, and it's really helpful for anybody who's listening today, especially for backseat leaders, is that we want to be people who are so afraid of succeeding at things that don't matter that we are willing to take the risk of failure.
Yeah.
Because when we take that risk, there is always that chance, inevitably it'll happen, where even if you fail 10 times, what does the Bible say? The Bible actually says that the righteous man falls down many times, 7 times over. But what does he do? He keeps getting back up. Mm-hmm. It's a number of completion. It's this idea that we all fall in many ways, the Bible says. However, what do? We get back up. That's a mark of redemption. And what we want to do together is we want to talk about, for Backseat Leaders today, that we don't have to be defined by our failures, and we can take calculated risk because we don't want to succeed at things that don't matter. And Geoff, I think that's a good segue into what you're going to talk about next. One of the key distinctions between success and failure is being able to discern the difference between frustration and failure. Can you talk a little bit about that for our Backseat Leaders today? Yeah,
and I think that we get frustrated because we're not getting to where we want to go with whatever thing we're trying to attempt. So whether it's a lofty risk-taking thing, we get frustrated because we're not actually accomplishing what we wanted to accomplish, right? Yep. And whether you're goal-oriented or not, there's still this desire to continue to move forward and continue to develop.
Yep.
And if there isn't, then I would argue that perhaps there's some other things to think about, and I'll talk about those in just a bit. But it's easy for us to simply get lost in the frustration. This is the cul-de-sac you're talking about. This is the destination when failure becomes the thing we just sit in. And you said it. You can fail, but the moment you start to call yourself the failure, that's where things get difficult. Now, things get frustrating, but they don't have to stop there. Here's kind of the thing I think, and I don't know, Brad. I work with students and young adults primarily, and one of the things I think that's so interesting to me as a person who works with different generations, I interact with older generations, boomers and busters,
all the above.
But primarily, I'm counseling and pastoring younger generations. What I find so interesting is younger leaders often find themselves putting the brakes on, not pressing the gas pedal when things get less than smooth. When things seem to be frustrating because they're not going the way you want them to go, when things get less than smooth or they seem like they're not successful because maybe we're looking at it from the wrong angle, we get frustrated and we put the brake pedal on.
Yep.
And these are moments when, I just want to encourage, especially our younger leaders, because I think they are the ones who are at most risk, Brad. When we talk about where people are in the back seat, we've talked about, finding your best seat in the back seat, being content in the back seat. These are previous episodes from 2020 you could go back and listen to. One of the primary things I think that comes for younger leaders is this: it's not going smooth. It's not going perfect. There's a small, maybe it seems small. We overstate how big it is. There's an amount of failure that's going on in this conversation or this project or this effort. And so, therefore, it must be the wrong thing.
Yeah.
It must not be the right direction. I must not be the right person for this. When we talk about it from a Christian worldview and we talk about following after Jesus, when things don't go well, when things are difficult, when frustration sets in because things are hard and we don't bear down, at that point, I've worked with Christians who would say, well, I don't even know if Jesus wants me to do this thing. But Jesus tells us that in this life you're going to have troubles. That you're going to experience things as you stretch and start to go towards things that are meaningful and important. It's not going to go easy for you all the time.
Yep.
That there are going to be some things that you're going to have to work through. There are going to be some difficult relationships that you're going to have to navigate. And they're not always going to be, well, we had one conversation, we apologized and moved on, right? And we were buddy, happy, joy, had pizza next Tuesday, right?
Yep.
I don't know why you have pizza on Tuesday, but maybe
nobody does, Geoff.
Well, sometimes. The point is that Jesus tells his followers, you're going to have struggles. It's going to happen. And even if you don't have a Christian worldview, say, for example, you're just trying to to work on being better, whether it's at your job, your vocation, whether it's working out and hitting the gym, whether it's being more generous and benevolent to the people around you, you're going to find that you're going to get rejected, that people aren't going to see things the way that you do. They're not going to talk about things the way you talk about them. They're going to judge things that you're doing, misjudge things that you're doing. And all of those things lead to tension. And tension can produce in us a frustration that we equate to failure when we don't name it well.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think it's really, really important for us as backseat leaders who we get told by front seat leaders what to do. We get we might have ideas on how things are supposed to go, and when we offer that opinion to our front seat leader or the person, or direct soup, our direct report, whatever it may be, when we offer those things and it doesn't go exceedingly well. So when I offer my idea and it doesn't get accepted, am I going to sit there? Am I going to live in that? Am I going to call myself a failure? Am I going to recognize that that's just frustrating? It is frustrating, but I don't have to live there.
Yep.
And I think that's why this is so important. Failure is a thing that if we don't embrace, and the earlier you can embrace failure as a part of the process, and the earlier you can recognize you don't have to sit in it, and you don't have to be named or identified by it. I've seen more leaders bear down and persevere when they can embrace it, and they can recognize it's part of the process of becoming successful and proficient.
Yeah, it's true. Geoff, I was just thinking about this. We know this is true. One of the hardest parts about leading is our own insecurity, isn't it? And much of the reason we run from failure, I was even thinking, what are some common things that we do when we fail? I think we defend ourselves, don't we? When it's pointed out and others see it, we feel this shame and we're being choked by it. We defend ourselves.
Yeah, don't call that out on me.
Yeah, well, it wasn't my fault, and you don't know
Somebody
the whole
did
story,
this.
and someone else, and we become a really good defense lawyer.
Yeah.
And we defend ourselves, or you know what we do? We just despair. We just despair, and I think that's what you're talking about. It's this posture of the heart and mind where we think, I am blank. And what we're trying to say together, what you've helped us do today, is to realize that no, actually neither of those things have to be true. We can embrace failure. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. It's not painful, but we can learn from it. We can learn from it, and that's what ultimately makes us wiser.
Yeah, and Brad, I think it's easy to go, well, you see all these successful people, you see people who have gone down in history as giants and things like this, that you want to be like. Some person you may look up to. Yeah. You see their highlight reel of the things that are going on until you see it come crashing down. But the reality is the people who you follow who have incredible integrity, the people who you follow or you look up to who have gotten to a place of success and have maintained a character and a personality, an identity that's been healthy, have done it through the fire of failure.
That's right.
One of the people, Brad, in history, my wife's a history teacher, and so she, every once in a while, she'll ask for things for like Christmas. And one of the things she asked for last year was a cardboard cutout of Winston Churchill.
It's awesome.
It is. It really is. And one of the things we did while we were in London a few years ago is you see all the sites, and one of them is a Winston Churchill statue. And there's a statue in the center of London of this man who wrote a lot. He spoke a lot. He led a lot in many cases. Most of his adult life was spent in public service. A lot of people would suggest, Winston Churchill was a giant. He was he deserved statues. He doesn't just have a statue; he has statues. Yeah,
museum.
When he died, it was significant. And the whole United Kingdom did significant things to pay homage and remember his life.
Yep.
A couple quotes from Winston Churchill about failure that I think are incredibly helpful for someone like me who hates failure. Success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm.
That's good.
So I'm going to fail. You're going to have to recognize that's a part of the process, and you got to keep moving forward. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts.
Yep.
Personally, that's one of my favorite things he ever said, because it does take courage to continue to go on. You know, you could talk, if you've spent any time evaluating Winston Churchill's actions as, you know, the Minister of War, but then also the Prime Minister his first go around, his Prime Minister the second go around, and some would say he should have gotten out way before he actually did. He had the courage to do what he knew he needed to do.
Yep.
And he failed sometimes. Some of the things that he decided to do as a leader did not produce like unadulterated success. There were some things about it that, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. Or there was plenty of critics who would have said you should have gone a different direction.
Yeah.
But he had the courage to go on. You know, there's this famous quote, if you're going through hell, keep going. And I think sometimes failure can feel that way. You know, failure can feel like it's just incredibly dark. There's no way you're going to get through it.
Yep.
And the fact of the matter is that if you just keep going and you get to the next thing, you're probably going to find some success.
It's true.
Brad, we've talked a lot about ethereal things. I want to get a little practical here.
Okay.
Because I think it's really important for us to help put some handles on how we navigate failure, how we have maybe navigated failure in our own lives. And so as we talk about failure, I want to give you like 3 really simple steps, some ways to get through seasons of frustration and don't allow them to be complete and utter failures where you stop that cul-de-sac. So the first thing is this: you got to name it. You have to name it. So when you find yourself, and you have to name it accurately. I think that's the more important part. Is the more that you name it and you name it accurately, you're going to be able to actually assess it well. So for example, you're doing this event, and this part, like the timing of the event and how we got through the program didn't go how you planned it. And so instead of saying the whole event was a sham, which it wasn't, because lots of people got connected to other people, maybe you made plenty of customer contacts, you built these relationships through the event. But the timing of it just took, you planned on it going 45 minutes. It went 1 hour and 15. Why did it go 1 hour and 15? And naming the things that didn't go so well, whether it's in the planning process or whether it's in the execution. Who didn't we prepare well enough to do the program and do it well? Naming the moments, naming the things that are actually the failures helps us to accurately assess what it is we need to do better to get better next time.
It's good.
And you're never going to do those things. You're never going to name those things if you're not honest about what went well and what didn't go well. And if I can say it, I would bring other people into this conversation. So if you've got other people who are part of your team, you're working sideways with, even your boss, like even your front seat leader, and say, hey, if you were me, what would you do differently? And Clay Scroggins quote, which I love, and allow them in and help them name accurately what didn't go right that helps us understand how we can make it go better next time.
Yeah, it's good.
So Brad, name it accurately, but then you have to budget for it. Like, you have to budget for it. You can't just, and I don't just mean money, I do mean money, but you also have to budget time. You have to budget, brain space for it. Recognize that anything that's going to be significant is going to have an amount of failure in it. And so how do you spend money towards making sure that even though we're going to fail a little bit, so you got margin in there. Have some margin in your time so you can actually sit down and actually assess it and evaluate it. I loved, it was a number of years ago, he's since passed away, Dick DeVos, who started Amway, was having an interview. It was called a Leadership Summit, and Bill Hybels was talking to him, and they had a relationship. Bill Hybels used to be the pastor at Willow Creek Community Church in South Barrington, Chicago. Anyway, those details literally don't matter. But Dick DeVos said something that just resonated with me. He said, get yourself doing some R&D. Be about doing some R&D. R&D, of course, is research and development. For those of us who don't actually work in places that have research and development, get yourself about doing some R&D. And what he meant was, you've got to be assessing and looking forward to what could be successful and account for the ways that you're going to be a failure. You're going to not be a failure, but you're going to find failure in the process. And I just loved it because I think it's easy, especially for us in the church world, for us in ministry world, where the resources usually are quite limited. The people resources are quite valuable. And how we navigate utilizing and leveraging those things is incredibly important that we do it well. It can be scary to say, we're going to do this thing, and we think it might fail. We think we may not be as successful as we're going to invest a ton of time. We're going to invest a ton of money into this thing. We don't know that it's going to be completely successful, but we do know that we're going to budget for it, we're going to attempt it, and we're going to try it. I think that's important because if we don't allow ourselves to account and budget for failure, we won't try and overcome it. So name it, budget for it, and the third thing is to grow from it. You can't actually overcome failure and move towards success, move towards these big things that are going to make you valuable to your organization, but also significant in your own experience. I mean, here's the thing, Brad. We can think that these things all have to do with our vocation. We can think that failure only affects us from our vocation. But we all know there are things outside of our vocation that are significant to us, that are important to us, that we need to extend on, right? That are part of our holistic life experience. And how we engage those things, we will grow from them when we name accurately how we failed, how we need to get better, and then we budget for it. So we can, next time we do this, we can still account for some failure. Because if you're going to continue to stretch, you're going to continue to go forward, you're going to fail. You're going to do it. So how you account for that, how you grow from that, that's when failure becomes a catalyst to success. And that's why I think it's super important for us. The more we embrace failure, we will find ourselves being more successful.
It's really good, Geoff. Well, thank you for, such a great episode of content. And we hope that our listeners today, well, maybe just a little bit today, not run from failure, but maybe embrace it just a little bit more today after our conversation. Geoff, this is it's been really good, and we love Backseat Leaders. And for those of you who are listening, man, we are in the trenches with you. We'd love to hear from you. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, look us up on Facebook, Backseat Leader. You can also go to the backseatleader.com.
You got it.
And nearly butchered that,
okay.
but I didn't. Backseatleader.com.
But we would edit it out if you did.
Yeah, we probably
wouldn't.
So, we'd love to hear from you. And if anything we've talked about today has been helpful, tweet it out, Facebook us, DM us on Instagram. We'd love to hear from you, even some ideas for future episodes and topics. We'd love to hear from that as well. Geoff, anything to close us out with today?
Brad, I would love to know when you're going to watch the third episode of WandaVision.
This has been another episode of the Backseat Leadership Podcast. We'll see you next time.
See you, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Backseat Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe and leave a review to help other backseat leaders join the conversation. For more information, visit www.backseatleader.com.